Welcome back, everybody. We're going to get into some very controversial content today, and I'm really excited about it. So, just like the title says, I believe we should support law enforcement like family. And this is what I mean by this, right? People have a very unique, law enforcement is one of those very unique functions in society, right? I will say, from my personal belief, that we need some kind of law and order in a society. Without that, you truly have without rule of law. You totally have a shit hits the fan society, right? Power dynamics are a vacuum. This is undeniable. When you take one out, something has to come up in its place. And while law enforcement is not perfect, neither is any other organization or ideology. But yes, I do believe law enforcement provides a very essential, important role in society. And with that being said, I think it's important that we look at this conversation from a very nuanced perspective. So today I'm going to be talking to you about why I think we should support law enforcement like family. And in order to do that, I think we should talk about what that doesn't mean, what that does mean, and what that doesn't mean. So I'm going to start this off with what it doesn't mean, okay? And this is going to be probably a longer video, so I just want to caveat this with that. So if you have other important things to do, you might just want to leave me on audio and listen. But what it doesn't mean. Supporting law enforcement like family doesn't mean writing them a blank check, okay? It doesn't mean covering up or justifying bad behavior. It doesn't mean rushing to judgment. It doesn't mean defunding law enforcement. It doesn't mean to mock, belittle, or undermine the process or the individuals as part or whole. It doesn't mean being disparaging of your part in the community. So I think that's pretty self-evident, but I'm going to go into more detail for those of you that maybe don't understand what exactly I'm saying. It doesn't mean writing them a blank check to do whatever they want. Obviously, there needs to be rule of law, and rule of law needs to apply to everybody within that society. Okay, and yes, there are tons of examples of officers not living up to the expectations of what it is to be a police officer. And then you have the vast majority, the 99% of officers that do live up to the expectation. But I get it. As a society, we like to hyper focus on the officers that do bad because, number one, we should correct that behavior and we should learn from it. But number two, officers represent authority, and everybody to some degree, gets off on whenever authority does something wrong. And I think that's just comes down to human nature. And you guys know me, I'm going to give it to you straight. So this video is no different. It doesn't mean covering up bad behavior. Bad behavior is bad behavior. It should be exposed and it should be taken care of accordingly. Doesn't mean rushing to judgment. Most of the time when there is something that's controversial within law enforcement, people immediately run to judgment before all the facts are even clear or evident. That's not helpful. It's not helpful to anybody. The perceived suspect or the perceived victim doesn't help anybody. Defunding law enforcement doesn't help anything. In fact, defunding law enforcement makes these issues worse. It exacerbates these issues. With that being said, that doesn't mean you just write, like I said, doesn't mean you write law enforcement a blank check for whatever they want. But if you're going to fix or if you're going to address the defunding issue, you need to not be disparaging in your part in that, which is understanding what the money is being spent on and asking questions and getting involved, which is what we're going to talk about next. Also, not to mock or belittle or undermine the process. The process is not perfect. And a lot of times the process is can be very confusing at times. And a lot of that has to do with policy. And the great thing about policy is it can be fixed. It can be changed. But you can't be disparaging, and you're part of it as a community. As a person in society, you have a responsibility as well. And we're going to be talking about that here on what supporting law enforcement like family does mean. It means providing law enforcement with the tools they need to be successful. And that is a conversation. For some people, you may not think that a firearm is a tool they need. You may not think that a taser is a tool they need. You may not think mace or handcuffs or any of the implements officers have are tools for success. Tools may not even be what's on their gear belt. Tools may be the training they have, and may be the policies that they are restricted in, or the policies they have to do their job. So providing them with the tools for success is a very nuanced conversation. It really is. Because like I said, tools are not just what's on their tool belt. Tools are their Lexipol policies, what they can and can't do. There are many agencies that have, for example, tow policies, in which an officer can tow a vehicle for meeting a parameter requirement. Does it mean the officer is going to do it? No. There's discretion. And there's discretion that is based upon that officer's training, that officer's understanding of the law, and the officer's understanding of the situation, right? So with that being said, it's nuanced. But there are other agencies that have policies that say officer has no discretion. The officer shall tow the car for X, Y, and Z. Or there's other policies, and there's a lot more agencies that have policies that would restrict the officer from towing the vehicle at all. And policies, most of the time, come down to liability. And so it's important to understand these because the nuances are great. And I talk to people all the time that have no idea of the understanding. They just know how something makes them feel, but they have no idea of the nuance behind why a policy is in place, or, you know, understanding what a tool for success is. Everybody thinks it's the gun belt. There's so much more to proper tools to be successful than just what's on the officer's utility belt. I think it's important for people to be open-minded. And this goes for officers. This also goes for citizens, because you are one person that has one opinion in a community. I can tell you that I have opinions that are not widely held in a rural, rustic community, and vice versa. Especially if you live in a very diverse area or diverse city, you have life experiences, you have training experiences that make you different than probably your neighbor. Does that mean that you guys have to agree? No. Does it mean that you guys should probably be open-minded to understanding how you guys interact with each other? Abso-fucking-lutely, right? Be open-minded. You should make decisions based upon an interaction that happened, based upon the actual law, and based upon the facts, right? Like I've already been alluding to, and we're going to get into more detail as we go on, what you think is a law may not necessarily be a law, and what you think is actually happening with the circumstances may not actually be happening. So it's important that you make decisions based upon the law and based upon the facts. A great example of this. There are many states where take an issue, like take a tenant issue, or take an issue where you invited somebody in your home, and after 2 weeks you're like, nah, this isn't working, I want to kick him out. You call an officer tells you, I can't do anything. This is a civil matter because this person states they have residency, right? A lot of people get upset. Well, this is my house. I can prove this isn't my house. But based upon this happening a lot in many states, there's lots of case law that would prohibit an officer from using force to remove the person because you have allowed the person to stay there for a certain amount of time. But as a police officer that's going on scene, they may not be able to know or justify how long, because you have what you're saying, you have what the person that's already in the house when the officer arrived is saying, and you have all the other factors leading into it. Does the person getting mail there? Does the person have, does it appear that the person has been staying there long term? Does the person claim that they've been staying there long term? So these are all issues that people really get upset about, but they don't understand the nuance behind why that is. And a lot of time it's because that person is not taking accountability for the human condition. They're not taking accountability or responsibility for the decisions that they've made. And we put police officers on the front lines to have to circumnavigate and deal with a lot of the fiat, and the red tape that goes in with living in a civil society. In a civil society, more times than not, a lot of things are civil. Doing ride-alongs. I think doing ride-alongs is huge. It's amazing what people think, what people, will admit to when they're sitting in the passenger seat of a police cruiser. It's pretty amazing. It's amazing for some people to see how the world is inside a patrol vehicle versus outside a patrol vehicle. A lot of people ask about those demographics of what it is to be inside a police cruiser. They see the world differently once they're, sitting inside a police cruiser as a citizen and looking at the world around them, because there's then becomes an immediate understanding that you are responsible for the community that you serve in, or that this officer is serving in. And I think that it brings a lot of clarity and understanding a lot of the nuances that you may not understand or realize. So I think it's very important, if you want to really understand law enforcement, to make changes, even to make corrections, you actually have to understand what it is to be in that seat. And I think it's super important to do ride-alongs, because you may see something and you may see a situation differently than the way that officer sees it. And that's probably because of your life experiences versus his life experiences. And I'm not saying that your life experiences are wrong. I'm not saying that they're right. But what I'm saying is, in order for you to affect good change, which you should be doing as a citizen, your input should matter. You should at least have an understanding of what's going on the other side. And while you're doing those ride-alongs, I think that's a perfect time to talk to your rank and file officers. The officers that are on the beat, the officers that are responsible for conducting traffic, responsible for going to those domestic violence calls, that are responsible for, circumnavigating and wading into all these civil matters of the civil society. I think it's important to talk to these police officers, especially your rank and file officers, and see how they feel about things. It's amazing the kind of conversation you can have when you are talking to them as a human being and not talking to them as, so as an officer that's confused as to a scene that he's coming on because he has no idea what he's coming up against, and just throwing a camera in his face. There's nothing wrong with doing either or, but if you're really wanting to affect a good and important change, you should be having these conversations. And if these departments don't want to have these conversations, that's when obviously there is a need for activism, and there's a need for change, right? Talk to police administration, and by admin I mean people that, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, police chiefs, depending on the demographic of that agency or that sheriff's office. Talk to the people that are responsible for creating policy, that are responsible for enforcing policy, that are responsible for enforcing, investigations or discipline on the employees that they employ. Hold them accountable too. Ask them direct questions. And if they're not giving you direct answers, I don't see it wrong with bringing that to light and making them aware that you understand that they're not answering those questions. It's important. I think it's important that we do hold everybody, including law enforcement, accountable to the Constitution, state, local laws, department policies, and most importantly, asking for clarification and transparency when one of those aforementioned state laws, local laws, ordinances, or department policies don't seem to overlap. And a lot of times we see that when it comes to filming mass protests, right? You see a lot of these auditors that go in and they wonder why law enforcement is not allowing them to record in a restricted area. Well, it's a public building. I should be able to record wherever I want. Well, maybe that would be a good conversation to have. And, in that situation, when you're putting a camera in somebody's face, you may not be able to get down to the nuance of things, right? That may not be the best time to have that conversation. It's your right to push the issue. But it's really important to understand the transparencies of why and why not. And it's important for your local municipality to explain that to you in a way that makes sense, in a way that is lawful. Accountability on both sides. I think it's important to actually know what the laws, ordinances, codes, and policies are, because a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know what their local law enforcement's lexical policies are. And it usually is as simple as going to their website and downloading a copy of their lexical policies, especially big agencies. You can literally get NYPD, Seattle PD, Portland PD, Dallas PD's lexical policies, their policies that govern law enforcement. You can literally download them from their website. So if you want to know what their tow policy is, what they can tow for, it's there. If you want to know what they can pursue a vehicle for, it's there. I mean, the answers are right there. You just have to simply look at them and understand them, And what you think is a law may not actually be a law, or that law may be translated in some Supreme Court case to mean something other than what you think it is. It's important to know. I do think that, citizens we should all be attending city council meetings. I think law-abiding citizens should hold local office. I believe law-abiding citizens should be voting in local elections. I believe that the citizenry should be getting involved in their community. I think they should be vocal. I think they should ask questions. I think everybody should express their concerns when it comes to public policy. And most importantly, since we're talking about law enforcement, the enforcement aspect of public policy. I think that we should be respectful and be efficient, because involvement is key. 99% of law enforcement officers serve honorably and do what they need to be doing for the greater order and greater good of the society in which they're involved in. And like any relationship, it's a give and take, right? With any relationship, there is accountability and there's expectations. It's just like your child. You want to give your child the tools that they need to be successful. But you also should stress to your children what you will and will not tolerate. The citizenry has not only the responsibility, but the obligation to set forth the parameters for how they live their life, right? That's what everyone talks about with the Constitution. It's amazing when you look at citizens that enjoy their law enforcement, that enjoy the work that they do. You'll notice something very, very unique with a lot of good agencies that I've seen. You'll notice that communities that are very involved in their city councils, that are very involved with their communities, and that really care about their law enforcement officers, is because they actually give a shit. There is an expectation of high quality of service. There is an expectation that the officers are going to do what they need to do. But with that, you see these community people put a lot in trust their police officers and expect them to hold that standard. And they make it very vocal what they expect from their local law enforcement. And their local law enforcement, they live up to those expectations. It's amazing what somebody can do. Regardless, take the law enforcement aspect away from it. It's amazing what people can do when you motivate them and when you equip them and when you hold them to a standard. It's amazing. It's amazing what good leadership can do. The community should be the leaders. The citizens should be the leaders of their communities. And yes, that means it puts an onus on the everyday person to be active and be involved. If we see these, we saw the shooting in Atlanta where the African-American male was drunk behind the wheel at a Wendy's, I believe, and he attacked a police officer, tried to take his gun. He was subsequently shot. And a lot of people are wondering, well, why was the officer trying to arrest him for DUI? Why was the officer trying to arrest him for his warrants? Why was the officer trying to do all those things? Well, I can sit here and we can break it down, or I can just simply ask you, if you don't want police officers to enforce DUI laws, then fucking get rid of them. If you don't want police officers to enforce warrants, then fucking get rid of them. Get rid of those laws. If you live in a community where you truly just don't want, seriously, if a city wanted their officers to not perform certain functions, you could get rid of your police department. You could create policy that red tapes and red lines their ability to do that function. Agencies do it all the time, all over the country. All the time. Great example, tow policies. There's a lot of agencies out there that give their officers a lot of power to enforce, to tow cars, whether that be for driving while suspended, driving without insurance, DUI, traffic hazards. There are a lot of different factors that within state law that officers can tow vehicles. And you'll find that the agencies that allow their officers to tow vehicles have done a lot of training and empower their officers with authority, but most importantly, discretion. It is 100% clear why the officer is towing the vehicle and why they should be towing the vehicle. You see, honestly, the agencies that still allow it, there's a lot of training that's involved because there is liability with that. And then you have other agencies that say, no, you won't tow a car for any reason whatsoever. Right? So if a local municipality really doesn't want their officers to do something, as a community, you could absolutely get involved and change it immediately overnight. If you didn't want your law enforcement, you can immediately change that overnight. Citizens have so much power when it comes to the prioritization of what happens with enforcement in their communities. Literally, things can change overnight, and they do all the time. So it's your responsibility, it's our responsibility as citizens to make it expressly clear what the expectations for law enforcement are. Just like you would for your child, just like you would for your mother, your father, your uncle, your cousin, there are expectations. And when they don't live up to those expectations, as a good leader, as a good person, that should be made known. And in society, at least the United States of America, the Constitution has entrusted the citizenry from a democratic republic standpoint to make those decisions. If you're watching this video, it's your job to ensure that accountability is held and that your voice is held. It's as simple as that. It's as easy as that. And I know it's as easy as that because we see this happening every single day. So I encourage you. I'm going to leave my notes here in the description box below for you guys to take a look at. But it's all about accountability. And when somebody, whether you're a citizen or an officer, whether you step out, you should be held accountable. And the citizens have a lot more power than you realize. Don't be fooled by what the media has tried to drown you with. Don't be fooled with what other people's opinions on things are. Get active. Actually understand. Understand this from a nuanced perspective. And when you do, I think you'll be a lot more comfortable and you'll be a lot more understanding. Because there's a lot of people think a lot of crazy things. And it's not my job to change your mind. But this template, if you really, like I said, if you really think that, law enforcement is the worst and everything else, by following this template, it's not going to hurt you. It's actually going to make you more efficient. If you support law enforcement and you're on the opposite side of that perspective and you follow this template, it's going to make you a lot more efficient. So regardless of where you fall on this, on this paradigm, if you follow these simple, suggestions and you implement them, no matter if you're anti-cop or pro-cop, you'll be more efficient in what it is you're trying to accomplish. And who knows? You might learn something along the way. So there you have it. Hope you guys liked the video. If you don't, please leave me a thumbs down. Articulate yourself in the comment section below. Let's have a conversation. Like I said, no system is perfect. No organization is perfect. But If you're wanting to make it more efficient, or if you're at least wanting your ideas and policies to be enacted, this is the most efficient way to go about it. That's what it comes down to, guys. Well, that's all I have for you. As always, guys, long live the Republic.